The Voice 17104.com.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice. Greetings, my friends, and salutations. We're in the midst of Black History Month. It's the shortest month in the year. I think it's only 28 days, yet it's a very significant month. And so much has happened throughout history. What we're going to deal with is Black leadership. I'm going to give you an overview of some noted Black leadership. I just learned something. I was listening to a video, 100 Black leaders within the city of Harrisburg. And that was an interesting trail. So what I'm going to do is give you the names of some Black leaders that will be noted worldwide, or not just in the city of Harrisburg, but I also will be throwing in some names of some of the local leaders. One thing is really, when you talk about leadership and what things that people have done, if you don't have your own system of promotion and communication, then a lot of people, a lot of individuals are totally overlooked. I was born in a small town, outside of a small town in Southwest Georgia, in a community called Spring Hill, but it's right outside of Thomasville, Georgia, an historical town, a gorgeous town, a really beautiful place. And then I was raised in the city of Chester, and I was extremely involved in the civil rights movement over a period of time. And there are things that I personally accomplished and was able to do, and just thank God that he put me in a position to be able to do those things. But then it did not make the history book. A lot of things that we did in Harrisburg never made the history book. But did it provide the kind of services that's needed? Did it make a difference? Did it bring about change? So we can't really be so caught up on being noted that we forget that it's very, very important to accomplish our goals in the first place. What we're trying to go after and what we're trying to do has got to come first. Because if we get caught up in our imagery, then we lose sight on our purpose and our goals. However, for posterity, for our children's children, it's also very, very important and critical that they know history, that they know the things that we have done throughout the centuries. And the only way they will know it is if we document it ourselves. We cannot rely for somebody else to restore or write our history. I'm in the process, and it's a slow process of doing my memoirs. And I'm still alive, so I'm still, we have still things to write about. So I'm gonna write these things down, and then I'm gonna have it published, and I'm gonna share. I have quite a few grandchildren, and I have beginning to have more and more great-grandchildren. I got 2 grandchildren, great-grandchildren, twins on the way. My beloved grandson and his wife, beautiful wife, Raven. They're having twins, and I don't mind my announce it publicly, but I'm so thrilled about it that I think it's absolutely wonderful. But today I'm going to go step by step, and I'm going to talk about individual leaders within our Black community. And then I'm going to underline some local folks also that were involved in this process. Okay, let's get started. Who was the richest man who ever lived. Who was the richest man that ever lived? Now, this is calculations by scientists, white scientists, if I might say, as well as black historians. According to history, Mansa Musa, I mentioned his name before, Mansa Musa was the richest man that ever lived. I don't know how much he was worth. Was it a trillion? I know it was many, many billions. If it was compared relative to what it is today. Mansa Musa, Mandingo, his tribe, his people were the Mandingos. He was Muslim. He was from Mali, the country of Mali. Mali is famous in our day for its mudcloth material. I got mudcloth things in my inventory. But Mansa Musa was considered the richest man that ever lived. And according to historical evidence, there was a man by the name of Omari, who was an explorer under the regime of Mansa Musa, who sailed across the world and arrived in the New World. The first people, historically, the first Native Americans were people of African descent. The likelihood is that they were Mandingos and they were followers of Mansa Musa. There's a lot of theories passed down through oral and now written history. First off, when Omari reached the shores of South America, Christopher Columbus has claimed to have seen these Black Africans on ships on their way. Christopher Columbus himself, who people credit was discovering the New World. But how can you discover something where people have been there for thousands of years, got cities, colonies, and you discovered it? It just amazes me how some of these races can make up theories, and people who might happen to be of his ethnicity want terribly to believe it. And it's a lie. He ain't discovered doo-doo. He did not, excuse my language, but he did not discover it. Now, I have to admit that with his landing there, he did upload and encourage the interaction between European nations and the New World. I can't take that away from him, but he was just not the first, all I'm saying. It was significant. He got ships that he gotten from the King of Spain. So his arrival and carrying out the wishes of the King of Spain was very, very important. And he did that, but he was not the discoverer first. The offspring, the followers of Mansa Musa can claim that. The Mandingo people, known for their extreme intelligence, known for their warlike capacity. The little country of Gambia, very significant country, where Alex Haley ancestors hail from, were Mandingo people. Read Alex Haley's autobiography and learn something about the Mandingos. Noteworthy people, very, very important to me. But Mansa Musa, and of course the history of mankind, those thousands of years prior to Mansa Musa. Even though he was the first to enter the New World, he was not the first man. I said it and I say it again. Mankind began in Africa. Mother Africa is the mother of mankind. And then when mankind was born, they spread their wings throughout the world. And they landed where? Europe. The Grimaldi people of Italian peasantry, African ancestry. New Zealand, Australia, China, Shang dynasty. They spread their tentacles throughout the world. We have lifted up one person, and that was Mansa Musa, Muslim, who also spread Islam, also responsible for Timbuktu, and was a great empire. And I was told they had lots of libraries and museums and that kind of thing until racists came in and destroyed the history. But we still have an oral history, some things that have been written. Okay, let's hit it again. Let's talk about some of the most noted people of our race. And I'm going to stay with Africa just for a minute. The next person that I want to talk about is one of my favorites. It's Kwame Nkrumah. Lord knows the importance of Kwame Nkrumah and his creation of what is called Pan-Africanism. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president, prime minister of Ghana. Let me give you some historical things about Kwame Nkrumah. He wasn't born a king, so that's not the way it happened. Born of a family of modest means, but was able to gather enough resources to come to the United States of America. He studied and did his undergraduate work at Lincoln University in Oxford, in Pennsylvania. And while he was studying at Lincoln, his roommate was a gentleman by the name of William Hatcher, my wife's father. My wife's father, we call him Bill Hatcher. Bill Hatcher was a close friend, a very, very good friend. They're not only roommates, they were buddies, they were good friends. They established a relationship. As a matter of fact, my wife went to Ghana. Mary Elizabeth James. She went to Ghana, spent several months in a program called Crossroads Africa. And she worked and lived with the common folks and with the everyday people. She also was given a letter by her dad to present to Nkrumah while she was there. Still working hard, hard working lady. Kwame Nkrumah. And he finished his undergraduate degree at Lincoln. He then studied at the University of Pennsylvania. He got his master's and his PhD, University of Pennsylvania. and stayed in the States and taught at the University of Pennsylvania. And then he came home. And then Nkrumah was a union leader. So he led local unions to rebel against the colonialists who were the British. One good thing about on the Ghana is they understand they speak English as their first language. Yeah, that's great. So I'll be able to communicate. But he organized unions against his oppressor. As a result, he was locked up and he spent some time in prison. But he came out of prison, and his whole thing was he wanted to make what they call the United States of Africa. The United States of Africa. And he also studied the teachings of Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey believed very strongly that we should return to Africa and set up a foothold in Africa. Marcus Garvey said, we need to go home. It doesn't mean that all Africans have to go home. But Marcus Garvey strong believed in establishing a nation, not a colony, a nation. And he was very, very instrumental in getting our folk to return to Africa. Under President Lincoln, and even though Frederick Douglass, a great Black leader, and he's one of the people on our list that we want to talk about, they established a nation of Liberia. They've had their ups and downs, they have had their tales of woe, but they established their nation in Africa, and over 13,000 Africans returned home. Now, when you got well over 1 million folks, I mean, it didn't make a tremendous dent, but people who wanted to go home were given that option. And I think that was important. Back in those days, there were some folks there that came from Africa. I mean, it was like they had not been in America a long time. So they returned home. Sometimes they didn't find home. I understand exactly the way it was when they left, but they got home and began to restore the dignity, the nationhood of their nation. So we only had 2 nations in Africa that established their independence. That was Liberia, and then we had Ethiopia or Abyssinia that was never conquered by the Western colonialist people. So Kwame Nkrumah, Kwame, and keep that name in mind. He died, he never got to be a real old man. He got sick and he passed on. Some people believe that maybe colonialists may have had something to do with it. I don't really know, but one thing I do know is that we all going to pass on one day. And he did pass on, Kwame Nkrumah. So let's move along, and let's look at some of the other great leaders. And we're going to move from Africa, which there were many, and there still are many, many, many people of African descent that are doing quite well. Let's look at Marcus Garvey. Who was Marcus Garvey? Where was Marcus Garvey from? One thing that I'll have to say is that we have a terrible habit as people of African descent wanting to progress. to be on first, to be the most noted. And the criteria that we use for that is what white folks think of us, or what the major newspapers or news say about us, rather than what good we are doing for ourselves and for our people. And Garvey had that problem. Garvey was a man from Jamaica, man. Marcus Garvey, one of the greatest, most thoughtful, most energetic people and leadership that we have ever had. He was what you call a Black nationalist, which was a positive thing. It was not an anti-white thing, not at all. He was not a racist. He was a great man, a very, very, very great man. And Marcus Garvey established somewhat what you might call a nation right here in the United States. He established an organization called the Negro Universal Improvement Association. The Negro Universal Improvement Association, established by the late, great Marcus Garvey. They established newspaper lines. They established a ship line, sundry retail shops throughout the country. And at a time when our population was nowhere near as great now, we didn't have any 12 million people there. We had 5 or 6 million. 4 million of those folks considered themselves Garveyites. They established throughout the nation chapters of the Negro Improvement Association. Yes, they did. And they were very, very, very active. I can remember as a young man dating a young woman who was going to Temple University at the time, going to some of the Negro Universal Improvement Association meetings up in North Philadelphia. Very active group there. Very much informed. But at the same time, when Marcus Garvey was saying and speaking and praying for unity of our people, Marcus Garvey wanted us to come together as a people. He was not attacking other leaders. At this time, he was trying to pull them together and say, let's work together to try to get things done for our people. We want not only equal opportunity, because we ain't asking you to do everything for us. We're not begging you for jobs. We want to create our own jobs. You hear me? We are not begging you for jobs. We are trying to create our own jobs, our own business, build our own home. And we are proud to be Black. Understand that, boy. Ain't nothing wrong with this dark, ebony skin with the pigmentation that helps to protect against the sun. We are who we are, regardless of whether we're white, whether we're yellow, whether we're Chinese, whether we're Japanese. We people should learn to love who and what we are. There's no such thing as a superior race, be it white, be it Black, or yellow. And those colors are extremes, because I don't know anyone that's Black, that's pure white or yellow. I mean, these are just anthropologic terms that we have put together to identify folks. Marcus Garvey. They tell me, unfortunately, that the the Federal Bureau of Investigation, with the help of some of our Negro leaders, attacked and later deported Marcus Garvey on some trumped up racist policies. The man, every time a black leader is getting strong, become to be effective, and particularly when white folks begin to listen and say, that's making a lot of sense. As soon as the white thermometer goes up in terms of their support and interest in what this black man is doing, they get rid of him. Sad, 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 they get rid of the people who are telling the truth. And they got rid of Marcus Garvey along with other great people in this country. Marcus Garvey. We're talking about Black history. We're talking historically what Black folks have done in this country. Let's talk about another man, W.E. Burghardt Du Bois. Du Bois wrote a book called The Philadelphia Negro. First of all, he was an excellent writer. He was the first African-American graduate with a doctorate degree from Harvard. Second was William Monroe Trotter, who was a great orator and a great writer. I think he graduated with a master's degree from Harvard, but he was second African-American to graduate at such high esteem. Du Bois. One issue I had with Du Bois was hung up on what he called his talented tenth. Hung up on the degree thing. The degree is wonderful. It's important. But what's more important is what we do. And some people are self-educated. People like men like Shabazz, man who never attended college, but was one of the most brilliant, thoughtful, greatest leaders that we've ever had. Du Bois, believe it or not, like Garvey, moved back to Africa. And when he passed in the nation of Ghana, working on what he calls his Encyclopedia Africanus. Du Bois went back to Africa, criticized Marcus Garvey, but later did some of the same thing that Marcus Garvey had done. Let me not sound so critical of Du Bois. Du Bois did a lot of positive things also in his life. In 1909, Du Bois led the creation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Du Bois was singularly, even though he pulled together a board of directors and other people, established the National Association Colored People, the NAACP, was the brain thrust and the brainchild of W. Du Bois. He was able to involve members of the Jewish community, African-American community, and set up the strongest, the most steadfast civil rights group in the country that continues today. That's W.E. Du Bois. You got to give him credit for that. He did it. It's noteworthy that he did. And he advanced education, and education is really critically important, but God knows it is not everything. I encourage each and every one of my children to gain a higher education, and thank God they all did. Uh, but you don't use education or anything to tell yourself that you're better than someone else. That's a lie. We are all human beings, and there's some brilliant folks that never set foot in a college. And you can't count the intelligence of our folks by the level of education that they have received. Say it ain't so, Joe. It ain't so. It ain't so. And I noticed our new governor, Josh, just signed into law hundreds of jobs in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that once required a bachelor's degree to take that requirement out where it's not necessary and replace it with experience, training, and training. I totally agree with that. Josh Shapiro, I think he's going to be a great governor. And I'm looking forward to this man accomplishing some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. W.E. Burghardt Du Bois. I could go on and on and on about some of the things that this man did. And by establishing great civil rights, the NAACP, there are battles on different fronts in different states that you can give him credit for starting. There have been leaders such as Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, Medgar Evers, who was the tri-state area secretary for the NAACP in Mississippi. There was a man by the name of Phil Savage. Phil Savage was tri-state area secretary. He was out of Baltimore. And he worked with us in Chester and went to jail with us in Chester. March is a great man. He's a wonderful man, fantastic man. Personally, I started my whole history of being involved in civil rights in the NAACP Youth Council in Chester, Pennsylvania, under the leadership of Alfreda Charlton Reed. Leadership, Alfreda Charlton Reed. There were other leaders. There was George Raymond. There was Cecil Bond, who was president of the Adult Council. There was Stanley Branch, who was executive director for the NAACP, and then later became the chairman of the Committee for Freedom Now. But make no mistake, they did not start those demonstrations. That was led by Alfreda Charlton Reed and her NAACP Youth Council. And we were marching against a segregated skating ring, under the auspices of a man we called King Jack O'Haley many, many years ago. I always correct that. We start talking about who started what. I know who started because I was there. I was there. Yeah, one of our members is on city council in Chester, Liz Williams, who was a wonderful, wonderful woman. Capable, intelligent woman. All right. Moving right along. Next individual that we want to talk about, I'm sure you heard about this fellow, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Everybody knows white, black, left, right, who ML King Jr., Dr. ML King Jr. was. Let's kind of talk about him a little bit. Where did he grow up? He's a man that grew up in an upper middle class family in the Black community. A family that faced a tremendous amount of tragedy, that donated their lives, their well-being to the cause of civil rights. The thing that I had to learn to understand from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is that war is no way to win freedom, justice, and equality. Let me say it again, war is no way to win freedom, justice, and equality. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King repeated what Jesus said. A man hits you on your left cheek, then turn to him your right cheek. Learn forgiveness. Learn agape love. Dedicate your life, dedicate your value system to teaching love in your children and in your children's children. Martin Luther King studied theology in my hometown, Chester. Do I love Chester? You're darn right I love Chester. It's in my home and I love it. That. People talk about it, talk about the violence, but they don't talk about the giants that came through there. They don't talk about that. And one of those giants was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King that studied in Upland at Crozier Theological Seminary. That's where he got his theological degree before he went on to Boston University and got his doctorate degree. He studied in Chester, spent several years, 3 years to be exact, in Chester, Pennsylvania. And went over, got the next study position. He got was at Dexter Street Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. There, he engineered, I don't say he started, because I think it was the NAACP, Rosa Parks, test case for the NAACP that started the sit-in, but he engineered the bus boycott to break the backs of racism and discrimination at the Dexter Street Baptist Church, and then went on. He went to India to meet Nehru. Mahatma Gandhi, I think, had passed the time, to learn about the whole theory of passive resistance. Passive resistance. If a man hits you on your left cheek, turn to him your right cheek. And they found that millions of people began to join the movement through passive resistance. Many of them lost their lives. Martin Luther King lost his life. And there's been suspicion that possibly our own government may have been involved in some of that. One mortal enemy of Dr. King was J. Edgar Hoover, whose name is on the FBI building in Washington, D.C. It's sad. We don't know that necessarily to be the case, but there's really some question as to who they blame for killing King, whether or not he did it alone or whether or not he did it. But we know then that King was assassinated, and it appears that all of our great leaders get assassinated. And during the period of time when King was assassinated, the President of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Irish warrior for freedom and equality, was assassinated. And then his brother, Robert Kennedy, was assassinated. Terrible, 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 terrible thing. We lost some of our other civil rights movement. Whitney Young, who was a champion swimmer. Whitney Young, a champion swimmer, drowned in just a few feet of water. Whitney, another name that we should raise up as a great leader of our people, who established urban league branches throughout the country and who supported businesses, supported individuals. The working man was a great leader. Then you had other folks to take over the league and help to take it down. It was terrible. All right, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King gave his final farewell speech and said, I've been to the mountaintop and I've looked over the River Jordan and we have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will reach the promised land. And sure enough, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King preached his own funeral. It was sad. It was terrible. But he preached his own funeral. In Memphis, Tennessee, in 1968, the great warrior for peace and righteousness was put down by an assassin's bullet. But this man had already received noted recognition throughout the world. He had received the Nobel Peace Prize. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind. My Lord, he said, stay on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah. And we walk, and then we talk with our mind. Stayed on freedom, walk, and then we talk, and we walk, and then we talk with my mind. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Sometimes I get the feeling and I want to break out in song, but we know that music has always been a part of our movement. And Dr. King loved the music. He loved to sing, and he loved to march. And he marched from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery. He marched in Memphis, Tennessee. He marched in Philadelphia, and he marched throughout the nation. This great man who spoke of love and hate. He does not believe in hate. He does not believe in division. He believes in unity. He led a march on Washington that probably had 300,000 people. Whenever the Park Service count, they always drop off a few, claim 250,000, but that was a great march. That march brought together a number of allies, and finally we had gotten the trade unions, who had been our enemies at one point, made it very difficult for us. Decided that some of the trade union leaders decided to be supportive of the movement, and they were there. Members of the Jewish community were there. Many of African Americans were there. I was there. uh, along with other members of my family many, many years ago. That was 1963, many, many, many moons ago. M.L. King, great leader, great leader. Okay, we got so many we can lift up, and we're going to have to do another show to lift up all of these people. But one thing that I want to do is to lift up one, and we have more to come, Gloria Richardson. Gloria Richardson is a great, great, great leader of the civil rights struggle. She was out of Chambersburg, Maryland. And she, along with her husband, along with her family, marched for freedom. But we got to love and know Gloria Richardson, because Gloria Richardson marched with us and went to jail with us in Chester, Pennsylvania, many years ago. She helped us get our act together in Chester, and we supported her. We went on freedom rides. I went on freedom rides to the West Shore of Maryland and support the leadership of Gloria Richardson. Some of the people criticized her because she refused to allow white racists to come in to her community and attack her people. So they had what was similar to what is called the Deacons for Defense and Justice. They supported their people, and they made sure that white racists did not come in. White racists knew that the blacks were ready for them. Now you say, on one hand, that I'm lifting up nonviolence and peace. I am. I will continue to live up nonviolence and peace. But you can't, if you bring a Bible to a shootout, I don't think we could have stopped the Vietnamese war with Bibles. We had to have some heavy artillery also. We had an organization in Louisiana called the Deacons for the Front Defense and Justice that made sure that our folks were protected. No offenses, no anti-America crap. These people were great patriots. Some of these people were veterans who had fought in wars to protect and love this country. I consider myself a patriot. I'm not going to America. This is my home. My Tizzy country thee, sweet land of liberty, to thee I sing, land where my fathers died, dying of the pilgrim's fire. Let freedom ring. Let it ring, let it ring, let it ring, let it ring. The real freedom. There's a lot of things that we've learned about freedom and that kind of thing. But I just want to lift up Gloria Richardson, Ella Baker. There are many women who, if we were not there, we would not have had SNCC. We would not have had some of these civil rights organizations, because the women lifted those organizations up. Gloria Richardson, keep Gloria Richardson in mind when you're looking at African American leaders. But let me throw out a couple more before we close out. Another person who was very controversial and had his own way of doing things, and very successful way of doing things, was Booker Taliaferro Washington. Booker T, they call him. I attended Booker Taliaferro Washington Elementary. Dr. Basti was the principal at the time when I attended. But Booker Taliaferro Washington was the headmaster, the president of Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama. He set up an institution, and he had his own philosophy. Booker T said, cast down your buckets where you may. In other words, not everybody was suited or in a position to get a college degree. Not everybody was suited to become a social worker. Some people would do well to raise food. Could we have a nation survive without food, without agriculture? Booker T. Washington, with the help of some of his noted professors, such as George Washington Carver, who, by the way, saved the South. The South was in a drought state. The South was having problems. Booker T. Washington, with his institution, creating internships and working very closely, gave the opportunity of individual farmers to know that and use new technology, new forms together to save the South. And because of this black school in Tuskegee, in Alabama, of all places, one of the most racist states on the planet Earth, very racist, were able to save the South and help black farmers. And black farmers had so much to deal with in terms of racism and barring and having folks trying to figure out some way to take their land. I had my grandfather, Richard C. James II, had well over 100 acres of land and had it stolen and taken from him by the racist crackers who came after them. They were also attacked by the Klan, but that didn't work out so well, Klan. But they had to deal with things, and this is in Spring Hill, Georgia, right outside of the town of Thomasville, Georgia. They, on the Hall Road, they had to fight the Klan. They had to lift up the bloodstained banner to protect themselves. And protect themselves, they did. It was sad. It was a sad day, but it happened. And see, there were a lot of leaders in our country, and we're going to talk about more leaders, and we're going to talk about local leaders. My grandfather was one of those local leaders. He was a leader of their community. Yes, he was. He was a strong advocate, and he fought to protect the integrity, the property, and the lives and fortune of people who lived in Spring Hill, Georgia. And Spring Hill was more or less a family settlement. Hopkins, James, Andersons, Dunbars, all of these people lived in Thomasville, Georgia. There's a lot of people we want to lift up. We haven't been able to get to. We thought about Louis Farrakhan is another man that we want to talk about. And we're going to do another show. Probably, I'm not sure exactly when, but I'll let you know. We're going to do another show that's going to lift up some of our local leaders and some of our national leaders. Personally, Farrakhan is on my list as one of the greatest Black leaders of all time. Whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not, Farrakhan organized a march on Washington and had over 3 million. I would say 1 out of every 3 Black men in America attended the March on Washington. He set up a March on Washington for Black men, trying to emphasize that they should be responsible. Take care of your children. Respect your women. Build your nation. Stop begging somebody else for a job. Create a job yourself. Support your business. Some of the things that Farrakhan has done, and then some people get mad at Farrakhan. But I think that Farrakhan, I lift him up as one of our great Black leaders. Yes, I do, along with Malcolm X, Shabazz, along with Martin Luther King, Du Bois, and the rest of them. Put Louis Farrakhan on that list. That's a list that he deserves to be on. Let me say something to you again. We're coming down to the end of the show. I had a lot of names on this list. I didn't get to those names, but we're still down at 35 South 8th Street. Lebanon, in the Lebanon Valley Farmers Market. And we're asking you to come and support. We need your help bad. Things are really turned for the worse at Lebanon Valley in terms of participation and people coming in. We got tons of discounted art, statues, oils. Everything is for sale. Everything is on. We got $200 drums that we're selling for $150. We got statues that are worth $200 and $300 that we're selling for $80 and $70. We have African clothing that we cut the price in half. We got caftans for women. We got two-piece outfits for men. We got some of the most beautiful original art. We got original oil paintings, original art created in Guinea-Bissau. And they are reduced in half price. So come and see us, will you? Look at those drums. Look at those huge animals and cats. That is there. There's yours truly down there. You're trying to be of service to our people. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you. Appreciate the opportunity of talking to you and being a blessing. There's a lot of things that we have to do. And we still have a battle ahead of us in terms of our life goals and equal opportunity. And I'm going to say this, you can't destroy hate and ill will by creating it. You've got to learn, and I agree with Dr. Martin Luther King, to love somebody. You got to be able to love people. And I say to you, and I'll say it again, love is a very, very important element. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking out so much time, helping me with this novice and trying to get my situation together. Appreciate it, man. Hey, boy, I know that's a lot of work. I understand that. So God bless you, and may heaven smile upon you and be gracious unto thee. Take care, and God bless you so long, and I'll see you next week. Hey, James, signing off.
Thank you again for tuning in to the Richard James Show. Our African and our African American programs are set up to educate you on what's going on in this world. We thank you for taking out the time to listen. Let us hear from you sometime also. So this is your neighbor and your friend signing off. And so I'll see you again next week and hear from you again next week. So long. God bless.
The Voice 17104.com. This is Zanetta Wingfield, and you're listening to The Voice 17104.com. The Voice 17104.com.